First tonight, Albanese is refusing to commit to boosting Australia's defence spending, despite an urgent call from American Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth. The Trump administration says Australia needs to spend an extra $40 billion a year on the military. This would take our defence spend to 3.5% of GDP. Now, Hegseth delivered this message to Defence Minister Richard Marles directly in Singapore over the weekend. And he gave these pointed remarks in his speech to the Shangri-la Dialogue.
NATO members are pledging to spend 5% of their GDP on defence, even Germany. So it doesn't make sense for countries in Europe to do that while key allies in Asia spend less on defence in the face of an even more formidable threat.
Now, Marles indicated he was willing to discuss this, but Albanese has ruled it out.
What we'll do is we'll determine our defence policy, and we've invested just across the forwards an additional $10 billion in defence. What we'll do is continue to provide for investing in our capability, but also investing in our relationships in the region.
And his position is, despite other leaders globally increasing defence spending, Keir Starmer raised his military budget to 2.5% of GDP while cutting back on foreign aid in order to do so. And that was before he met with Trump in February. And Keir Starmer says his ambition is to reach 3% in a second term. Now, as you'll recall, the coalition had pledged an increase of defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by the end of the decade, with an aspirational goal of 3% over 10 years. And Labor's current spend is just 2% of GDP. Now, even before the Trump administration, former defence and national security officials, including Sir Angus Houston, Dennis Richardson, Michael Pezzullo and Kim Beazley, had all called for defence spending to increase to at least 3% of our GDP. And so Albanese is now under pressure, not just from the Trump administration, over our investment in defence. Now, to be fair, an immediate jump to 3.5% right away would be difficult, would be excessive, especially given our depleted budget position. We're heading towards $1 trillion in debt, thanks to Labor's reckless decision to pay Hex debt in order to buy off younger voters. But it's not so much a question about the size of the spending, but what defence is spending the money on. That's an equally crucial issue. Now, defence analyst Peter Jennings suggests that we need to grow the size of the Army, the Air Force and the Navy. He says we also need to buy a small fleet of conventionally powered submarines as an interim stopgap, and we have to secure our missile and air defence for our nation. And it's not only Hegseth and the Trump administration that's concerned about our military capabilities. You'll recall the Australian Strategic Policy Institute's report just last week expressed grave concerns about underinvestment, our ability to keep pace with future challenges, and it spoke of insufficient munitions and missile and defence systems. It said we had an underdeveloped domestic weapons manufacturing system.
We need to be looking at what we can produce locally. We need to be looking at what the rest of the world has been doing since Russia's war on Ukraine, particularly in the area of cheaper, mass-produced capabilities like drones and counter-drones. We have a number of companies in Australia that have the ability to produce these capabilities. They are cheaper, they can be mass-produced, and they're able to be done more quickly.
And ASPI highlighted that for the cost of a single Virginia-class submarine, Australia could produce or could procure over 24,000 Ukrainian-made maritime strike drones, and they have a range of over 1,000 kilometres. It's precisely this sort of equipment that's so important for modern warfare. And you only have to look at what Ukraine was able to achieve with similar drone equipment overnight. Those Ukrainian drones hitting more than 40 Russian nuclear-capable long-range bombers. That single attack destroyed, it said, 34% of Russia's fleet of air missile carriers. And the success of the attack came after Russia launched an air assault on Ukraine last week, and we know that it's preparing for a summer onslaught. Now, that's the same sort of attack Israel should also be launching, by the way, on Iran's nuclear capabilities. Now, President Zelensky praised the strike. He said it was Ukraine's longest range operation so far. And let's hope we see more of it, because Ukraine clearly can't rely on the United States to always come to its defence.